Hey friends, welcome to Hanging at the Hangar Bar. Scott and I are in full-blown show mode now, so we are very grateful for that, but we beg your indulgence for one more week. We are going to throw back to our delightful conversation with friend and author James Warda about his book, How Does Disney Do That? And we will be back with you with new content next week. So take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you real soon.
Hey, welcome to Hanging at the Hangar Bar. I'm Scott.
And I'm Candace. We're here to chat all things Disney as child-free Disney adults. Stories, snacks, and a little magic along the way.
Grab a drink and get comfy and come hang out with us. Our question of the day today, and we have a couple of guests that are going to help us answer our question of the day today, is besides the book, How Does Disney Do That? What is your favorite Disney read and why? Candace, let's start with you.
Okay, of course, aside from How Does Disney Do That? My favorite Disney read would probably have to be The Women of Walt Disney Imagineering. It's a
a good book.
phenomenal book. Phenomenal book.
That one had lots of pictures in it too, which makes it my kind of book. Okay, James, how about we go to you?
Yes. So I would say, boy, that is really a tough one. I would say probably Disney's Land by Richard Snow, and interviewed him for the book. Just a wonderful guy, but the book reads like all great nonfiction as like a real story and not just facts put together.
That's awesome. I'm going to South Africa here in a couple weeks. Got a 15-hour flight. That book is going along with me.
Well,
so
you let me know how you like it, and I'll let Richard know because
yeah, we'll do.
That's awesome.
We'll do. Theron, we'll go to you.
Perfect. One of my favorite books is by Ed Catmull. It's Creativity Inc. It's really about the story of Pixar and their creative process and how they keep invention and creativity and inspiration alive. And that resonates with what I do. My favorite quote of the book, which I use quite often, is Ed says, "Craft is what we are expected to know. Art is the unexpected use of our craft." And I thought that really hit home.
That's awesome.
I love that quote. Now I have another book I have to go out and buy.
Sorry.
I hadn't heard of that one. That one's going to be a good read too, I think. So for me, I'll wrap us up. My favorite book is a fairly recent read for me. And I don't remember who the author is, but it's called The Sorcerer's Brother. Candace, do you remember who the author is on that one?
I do not off the top of my head.
I should have Googled it beforehand because I thought I had the book near me, but I didn't. So I'll put it in the show notes when we're publishing this. But I love that book because it shows that Walt didn't do it alone. Walt had the support, and so much of what happens with the magic of Disney doesn't happen without Roy. And sometimes we forget that with the big face of the company, that Roy played a huge role in what we know as Disney today. And just the way that book reads is a fantastic sort of look into Roy's perspective instead of looking at Roy from Walt's perspective. And I just loved it.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to share with you, Candace, you said your favorite book was The Women of Walt Disney Imagineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paula Dinkle, who is in that book, is also
yes, she is.
She's just wonderful, really wonderful.
Yeah, she's everything I've heard from her, even in the Facebook group, which we'll get into in a few minutes. See her interact in there too. It's always fun to be like Candace and I are nerding out. We have an Imagineer, and we'll get into this. We have a former Imagineer on the podcast. We're in James's group with all these people with Disney connections. We're nerding out all the time. Hi, I'm Scott.
I'm Candace.
I'm Lacey. And I'm Lariah. Grab a drink and come hang with us at the Hangar Bar.
Okay, welcome back to the Hangar Bar, everybody. We are super excited to have you here for this episode. This one's going to be special. I just want you to sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation. We tonight have with us James Warda and Theron Skees. James is the author, and James, help me. I don't have the book right in front of me. It's How Does Disney Do That and Why It Matters. Right? Did I
Yes.
get the whole thing?
Well, it's how does Disney do that? How Disney makes us feel and why it matters. And I
Perfect.
just
Thank you.
have about 200 copies all around me right now. So
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And the main contributor, the co-author slash main contributor to that book, Theron Skees, who is a former Imagineer that has worked in Disney Springs, worked on the cruise line. We were in the open. We were talking about nerding out. This is probably going to be my favorite night of the year. I just want you both to know that. No expectations. This is going to be my favorite night of the year.
It's a lot of pressure, but I can handle it.
Right.
Scott, I'll say, and I mean this sincerely, this is one of my favorite nights because
Yeah.
you have both been there from the very beginning from this on this project, and you've been so supportive and in our groups. And so, that's what the book is great. I mean, obviously, love the book, but it's about the relationships, just like Walt learned, right? You were talking about Roy, and so very special.
Love that.
Yeah, so why don't we, before we get into the book, we're going to start with plugging all the things about the book and talking about that. But why don't we take just a couple minutes and have you each kind of introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your backgrounds, where you're coming from. Don't get too much into the book yet because we have some questions and some discussion points around that. But let's just learn a little bit more about you. So, Theron, I'll let you start this time.
Sounds great. Hi to all your listeners. My name is Theron Skees. I've been in the themed entertainment industry for 30 plus years, done quite a lot of work with Disney, with Universal, had a big start in film and television, which probably gave me the grounding I needed to be the Imagineer that I was. I've spent 23 years with Imagineering. Started, my first project was in Paris, working on Pirates of the Caribbean for the base park there, which was a blast. Went back to Paris. That was in 91, went back to Paris in 2006. And one of my first really big projects, it was Tower of Terror. And the whole entire neighborhood, the little mini land around Tower of Terror, which was awesome. And it's extra special now that Mr. Rohde did all of the changes at Disney's California Adventure, because that makes the Paris version unique now, which is kind of special for the whole team that did that. Scott, as you said, I've spent a lot of time on Disney Springs and also Disney Cruise Line. Spent 5 years of my life there, master planning islands, dry docking ships, and of course, working on and leading the design efforts for what you guys now know as Project Triton. It's the Triton class of ships, the three newest ships. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And I had to admit to Candace the other night, and before we get to James's introduction, when you talk about how does Disney do that, I think about Disney Springs. It was only about a year and a half ago that I figured out that Disney Springs had a cohesive story. And that's like, you think about it and you look through it, and then you're like, you have to kind of go out and look for it, but you don't necessarily make Disney Springs story for somebody like me. You make that story for the people that are going out looking for it. And it just blows my mind that you have one person in mind, kind of, that you're like, let's tell a story. Somebody might look here, so we better be able to explain it. It just blows my mind. So good work on Disney Springs. I'm sorry I didn't get to understanding the story until recently.
No problem. I'd love to publish a coffee table book on that, because I think it is underrated, and the full work that the team accomplished there, I don't think is visible by the guests. And I think if Hyperion or anybody else, Disney Publishing, is listening, I think that would be an amazing book that a lot of people would be very interested in, especially, like you say, Disney fans, because it's unexpected. And then when you see it, you're like, that's so cool. I've got to go.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, James, tell us a little bit about you.
All right, I gotta say, Candace, I was watching Scott as Theron was talking about his background, and he is full fanboy mode right
Yes.
now. Oh, and Scott, I get it, because when I always tell Theron, I would look at and see Imagineers, and it was like seeing Springsteen. And it's like, oh my
Yes.
God. Yeah. So, my story starts in the 1400s. Okay. See there? The joke never actually works, but I thought I'd try.
It works if you're Nosferatu. I mean, that
Yes.
works. But...
Well, yeah. Sometimes writing the book, I was up late at night. So I have several different things that make up my background that I think they all kind of funneled into what I'm doing now, right? So 25 years of a corporate communications background, doing communications, marketing, and PR. So which really led to being really understanding and respectful of the Disney brand, and how to do this. So that was important. I'm an author. My first book was called Where Are We Going So Fast? Finding the Sacred in Everyday Moments. And I didn't even realize until I was pretty much done with this book that both of my titles are questions. And what's funny is the books are very similar in what they're about, just from a different vantage point. Was a journalist, so wrote for the Chicago Tribune and some other papers. Was an adjunct professor, and then have written about Disney for quite a while, for WDW magazine, for Celebration, some other magazines, and just a student of Walt. And Roy is a very big piece of the book. I mean, because really, spoiler alert. I think one of the big answers, how does Disney do that, is love, and I can explain that. But when you see how Roy was with Walt, and from on Walt's very last day, and just how loving Roy was with him, man, that I think we feel that every time we go on any Disney attraction. That's due to some of that love.
Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you very much for the quick introductions. Let's just start here. James, why this book? Why now?
Great, really great question. I mean, I'd say probably two reasons. Why this book? Just personally, it's because I can go into the origin story of where the book came from.
Please do.
And then I'm going to flip that question. So why now? I had an experience and I wanted to share it, and I wanted to see if others felt the same way. Why now, especially, is I think the world, I'm not going to get into anything, but I'm just going to say, I think the world could use a bit of happiness and kindness, and just realizing we are much more alike than we're not, and we're all connected by something, so that's the back end of your question. The front end of your question, I'll give the first part of it, and then I'll turn it over to Theron. I'll do it in a seamless and effective way, I promise. Is that about 3 years ago, my wife and I were still living up in Illinois. We have 3 kids. Our oldest is Jeremy, middle son is Matthew, and our daughter's Alexandra. And our son Matthew was living down where I am now living in Florida. And he said, you have to come down and go on 2 rides, Rise of the Resistance and Flight of Passage, relatively new. And he said something that if he had not said it, I truly believe we might not be here right now, which is, he said, don't watch any video. Don't read about it. Don't watch any video. And so, okay, definitely. So we came down, and this was like end of pandemic, mid-pandemic, somewhere in there. So it was just good to be with him. We went on Rise, and that was, that's an experience. I don't consider that's not a ride. It's an experience. I really believe that. And I had, Star Wars. So very emotional connection. When you read the book, Theron really had a strong emotional connection to Star Wars. And then we went on Flight. And I remember going through the queue going, could you have more details, And then we got on our Banshees, and I remember being nervous, which Disney does well. We don't talk about that often. Disney does nervous well. Disney does some anxiety well. Dark, rumbling behind the walls, lights kind of pulsating, and I can feel it right now. The goosebumps are starting. Theron can attest to this. Every time I tell this story, I'm showing right here to the camera, the goosebumps. we got on this on it, and the wall went up, and we swooped in. And I remember looking around, and this is why if I'd watched video, I wouldn't have had this. I don't think I would have had this moment because it was all such a surprise. And after a couple minutes, I started to feel myself tear up. And I'm going, what the heck is going? Yeah, I'm a 57-year-old guy sitting next to his son, goggles on, crying on a Disney ride. And, so I'm trying to wipe the tear. I can't get my finger up in the goggle and stuff. So after a couple more minutes, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I know this feeling is wonder. I'm looking around in wonder. It was like childlike wonder, and I'm like, okay, wow. Didn't realize it because as adults, we don't get to feel that too often. Got off the ride, walked out into the Florida sun, and I remember thinking in my head, how does Disney do that? I remember that moment. And I didn't mean just like the method, so the rock face or the, what aperture or whatever the technical, I'll let Theron handle the technical details. I meant, how does there was somebody at the beginning of this whole thing who had passion and wanted me to feel something. And that's it's the designers, it's the cast members who sustained the ride. It's, the people who clean the ride, all of it. And so I asked myself that question, and being a writer, a couple weeks later, I wrote about it for my Chicago Tribune blog. And I kind of hit enter and posted it, kind of going, oh, this is a little embarrassing here. How are people going to react? And I got and within a day or two, I got over 100 replies from men and women saying, we cried too. Different Disney ride, different, but many on Flight of Passage. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to about the book when I was doing interviews who told me they cried on Flight of Passage. And then a couple weeks later, I was watching the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. I saw Imagineers tearing up about the rides they were talking about. And then, and I always state this, I do not get commission from LinkedIn for saying this. I was on LinkedIn. Disney Institute posted a video about Disney Springs. And in it was Theron. I forget Theron, there was another Imagineer in that video. But Theron was explaining the Disney Springs transformation. And, he's if you're going to partner with somebody, partner with Theron. Because the man can tell a story, And so the video was great. And I just commented on it, about how good it was. So at this point, I'm going to seamlessly and brilliantly turn it over to Theron.
Well, James reached out, and at that time, I was no longer working with WDI. I'd started my own company, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I'd love to, chat further and kind of talk about that. And what was really cool is sparking up this conversation based on an emotional experience that was created. And what was, I think, the impetus of the conversation that takes place in this book was really where James and I started, right? So James was passionately seeking, how is this done? How is it? It's not accidental. It's designed. It's created. How is this emotional connection made? And I think what James was excited to discover was that these experienced creators, in this case, the Imagineers, are also passionately wondering how the guest feels, right? You spend years and years and years making all these decisions and working as an integrated team, building these, crazy, amazing, wonder-filled experiences. And then literally as it's over, you're moving directly to the next project. You don't really get time. And only certain times do you actually get to interface with guests and really hear directly back from them on the impact of those experiences. So it was really great for James to discover, wow, as a former Imagineer, you're still interested in that emotional connection between a brand experience and an audience member. And that's how, James structured the book. And that was the two voices within the book, is that conversation and how important it is. And so even to this day, I still, both of us are still very passionate about that, and think that it's pretty important. As James said, in the world today, it wouldn't be bad to find connecting elements and unifiers where we could.
Yeah, 100%. So
Absolutely.
two quick things. James, as you were talking about tearing up on a ride, that sense of wonder. I've not had that on an attraction at Disney World, but my tearing up moment came in New York. It was the second Broadway show I had ever seen. I was sitting fourth row of The Lion King on Broadway. And they started singing that opening Lion King, the nostalgia that was included with that, the fact that an elephant leg was singing straight at me, like the same thing. Tears started and I couldn't stop it. And I'm not a crier. Candace will attest to this. I am not a crier at all. And tears like that. And when you said it was a sense of wonder, that's exactly what it was. It was, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm this nostalgic. All of these things just gets me. And then you also mentioned the Rise of the Resistance attraction. I'm a bigger fan of that than I am Flights of Passage. I think Rise of the Resistance is probably one of the greatest things that mankind has ever created. We have a friend, we just went to Disney last February, and it was our first time to go on Rise. And our friend, who's actually one of our biggest supporters for this podcast, so he's going to love hearing this story about himself, probably kill me for it. But we went through the queue for Rise of the Resistance. We were in there. We were in the vehicle. We went into the at room. Audibly, he went, oh, and started clapping. It was just the most amazing, like that. You talk about seeing somebody move from being an adult at Disney to being a child. He moved to be a 6-year-old child staring at Star Wars for the first time in that moment. And it was just absolutely fantastic. Those moments
It's probably one of my favorite parts of that trip, honestly.
Yeah, me too. So Candace, what's your kind of tear up moment for Disney? I know you have lots
Fireworks.
of them. Fireworks, which one? All
every
of them
time.
or
Happily Ever After.
yeah. And speaking of tears, and then we'll get back to the book because I have a few more questions there. But in February when we went, the most recent Epcot fireworks show, the people that created that soundtrack stuck a knife in my heart and twisted it several times, took it out, stuck it back in, and twisted it a couple more times when they mixed Because I Loved You and
Because She Loved Me.
Because She Loved Me and Remember Me. When those two songs kind of mixed together towards the middle to the end of that oh, again, I'm not a crier, and Candace can attest, I was almost full on bawling at that moment. Lots behind that. My mom had passed a few months before. It was just one of those things where it just hit me right in the feels, and nothing has done that before or since then. Just amazing how Disney can do that.
Those are awesome stories. That's every
Great
interview
stories.
I did.
Amazing.
Yeah, every interview I did, there'd be a story like that. And Theron can attest. We started the book off, it was going to be whimsical. That was the intent. So my wife and I, first of all, everyone can thank my wife that the book is not a white paper, because originally I was going to base it on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which it somewhat is, but it was like becoming like academic. No, that we didn't want to go that way. It was whimsical. And we do believe it is, parts of it are whimsical. But when you're talking about stories like that, there's something else going on there besides whimsy, right? And it just kind of came to me, when you're crying, when you're clapping in delight as a kid, you don't have time to think about how you're different from the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
You're all little kids clapping together. You're all crying together. It's very kind of open and vulnerable. And so I just, that's what I use a tagline with the group. You're probably familiar with it, Scott and Candace. It's, if Disney didn't exist, we need to create it.
Yes.
And I firmly believe that.
Yeah, 100% agree. So talk to us a little bit more about how your partnership evolved and changed from James, you reaching out to Theron and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. I have this idea." Tell us how we got here where you're both sitting on our podcast having a great time.
Well, I think we can do this as we always do. It's like Lennon and McCartney. I'll go ahead and I'll just say we just started talking first of all, and Theron always says it, but we've talked for 3 years now. Like, and when we would get on these calls, we were just talking. I was fanboying, and Theron's talking. I'm like, oh my god, really? But then we'd really get into very good conversations. And Theron does a lot of teaching through his own, his designers creative studio. He does like workshops on, and master classes on design. So I was constantly learning by talking with him, and he's a great storyteller. Maybe years down the road we'll have the lost tapes will be discovered. But I think
hundreds of hours.
Yeah, it really started very organically. And as I was talking to Theron, I was doing these interviews, and I'd talk to one person. Theron might connect me with another person, and they were all really generous, so they'd all connect me to other people. So Theron, I don't know if you want to, from your perspective, you want to share.
I think that's the most powerful representation of how we got here. And it also just happens to be the unvarnished truth. And it was just two people connecting and talking about something that they were passionate about. And, usually when you have these two, and you experienced it in your life too, no matter what you're talking about, you get two people together, they're passionate about something, and that each may have a different perspective, but the Venn diagram, right? The crossover of that in the middle is the real sweet spot and the magic. And we just spent a lot of time doing that. And it was really cool because James we'd talk, and then he would go away and then write and interview and talk, and then we'd get back together, and he'd say, I was thinking about this and that, and then that would hit something in me, and I'd say, hey, what if we, and how about, and it was a really cool process, not unlike what Imagineers go through in a creative process. It's talking through and details and alignment and going back to the beginning. What's the vision? What's the original goals, and staying aligned. So yeah, it was really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the things that, as I read the book, really surprised me is I think it's a better business book than you make it out to be. As I was reading it, as a person that leads a creative team, so our audience knows this, but Theron, I lead at a Fortune 100 insurance company. I lead a training, design, and delivery team. And
Very
as
cool.
I was reading that book, I didn't have a pen, and I was feeling very nervous about writing in it. But there were several things that I'm like, I may have to take this book and buy a copy for everybody on my team or all my leaders and say, let's read this together, because there's a lot of really good business lessons that we can take from these stories that aren't directly called out as business. Was that intentional, or did that just kind of happen?
Yeah, well, I think so. Theron will reinforce this, I'm sure, but I think we knew. Here's the thing: it started as the main goal was two primary audiences. One was Disney fans, the other are design professionals and students, people in the theme industry. Those are the two main audiences. But if you look in the book, the third audience is leaders, businesses, nonprofits, etc. So I think we both knew it would apply. And then I think what really helped is that, we have a chapter just for that, about what leaders can do. And then I just think it evolved even more strongly. And you put a book out in the world, and people, the important thing is, like, a book goes out in the world, you think the book's done. But it's like any piece of art. It's not yours anymore. It becomes the audience's. And I think the audience is telling us what the book is too. So Theron,
I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of my primary focuses for my firm, similar to the way that you described it, Scott, is I come along and help companies and leadership teams and C-suites and governments to figure out the best possible way to increase their brand equity, to grow their audience, and, you know, make extraordinary business goals happen. And part of that is helping creative people be more business minded and help business people be more creatively minded. And if you ask any brand, any C-suite of any global economic segment in the world, you know, how would you like to have, instead of a target customer base, how would you like to have a group of audience members that are fans, that love what you do? They don't really care what you make, but they love what you do, and they want to be a part of your culture. Every single one of those businesses would say, "Yeah, give me some of that, and a side of extra revenue, please." And we think, James and I know that, and in fact, part of our strategy, sorry, cat out of the bag, is we very much believe that there is a very strong business case for what is represented in the book. I'm so glad you picked that up, because that was, I think, as we rounded a third plate right toward home, and James was really putting in the hours to get all of it written and put together with the publisher. I think it really dawned on us that this could really be impactful for businesses, right? Because it's those two voices that are needed, the business and the customer.
Yeah, I was just going to add, think about it. If you're a business, right, what would you say if I told you your customer at home would have pictures of his family at your business as the kids were growing up? And what if I told you that their silverware would have the business's logo on it? Their kitchen towels would have the business's logo on it. That they would be willing to, that their biggest thing of the year was a countdown to their trip to your business. And that there was some fan out there, a customer who loved you so much that they were going to write a book about you, and you could, and fill in the blank. How does blank do that? You know, if you told me, if I'm Samsung or am I any company, and I know a customer will feel that way about what I have done, I mean, not only is that great business, that's great humanity. So,
yeah, and more businesses need to strive for that, right? Like, so often businesses lose sight of who the customer is and why they exist. Even in the insurance industry, like, we're nothing without our customers. And I think we tend to lose sight of that in the name of protection. You lose sight of who you're protecting sometimes. It's really so that hits home so much.
well, I'll tell you, Scott, I began my career as an instructional designer in a training department at a Fortune 100 insurance company.
We can say it was the same Fortune 100 company.
It was, and it was, which was a surprise. But again, coincidences all around the place. Here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. My wife and I, the other night, we watched 130 commercials. We counted it. As just watching one show, we watched 130 commercials, okay? I'm not putting down the advertising industry, whatever. By the end of those 130 commercials, our brains were like, oh my God, I cannot watch another one. Here's the deal. If you're a Fortune 100 insurance company, right, you can do one of two things. You can say, hey, here's all the products and services, and we'll save you this, we'll save you that. Or imagine if you had a commercial that showed somebody who had just been in a car accident, who's really rattled, right, and who's calling the number on their insurance card and saying, and the person on the other end of the line is saying, hey, we got you. We're here. Let's talk through this together. Imagine. That's what this is about. This is about when you go to other companies, when I go to fast food, whatever, I know when I'm getting the Disney experience. You know, now it's not full Disney, but, and you know what the Disney experience is? It's just treating you like you're a human being that they care about. So.
Yeah, and I absolutely love those moments, right? So a couple of years ago, I love telling stories as well. I'm probably not as good a storyteller as Theron is, and we'll see some of that when we ask more questions. But one of my favorite stories, and I instantly went back to my team and told them this story. On Friday mornings, I go get Starbucks for Candace and I. I'm driving through. I look a little bit homeless. It's still waking up on Friday mornings, and I'm in the drive-through. I've ordered our drinks, and I'm sitting in the car talking to the girl in the window, and she says, "Oh, you're a Disney fan. Tell me what your favorite movie is." And my brain instantly went to, how the heck does she know? I don't have anything in my car that shouts Disney. I was not wearing a Disney shirt. I was not wearing my Disney hat. This young lady was paying so close attention to a car in the drive-through that she noticed I had a rubber wedding band that had mouse ears on it, and called out and had a what ended up the cars behind me were probably mad because we probably had about a 5 or 6 minute conversation about Disney movies and the different eras of Disney movies. You recognize those Disney moments when you see them. That's the kind of detail you expect when you go to Disney, not when you go to Starbucks.
So true.
Just amazing.
Are you sure you weren't wearing your like big Mickey hands?
No, I was not. No big Mickey hands. I didn't have
ears. No ears.
I didn't
He
have
had my sparkly
cruise.
ears on though.
I didn't have my
Awesome.
cruise line front and back on the front of my car. I wasn't driving the big cruise line car. None of that. Yeah, it just blew my mind. Okay, so one more thing that I'm curious about with the book is throughout the book, just to give our audience a little bit of a preview, there are stories from folks that James met along the way. He's hinted at that, and I'll plug for me, if you like our podcast, go read that book. One of my stories actually made it into the book. Super excited about that. And one of the things that I caught myself wondering is, what was your favorite part of talking to all those people? Because the stories vary so much from memories as a kid to memories as an adult, or memories of an adult that was their last trip, everything in between. What was your favorite part about collecting those stories?
You know, I've interviewed people for a very long time in my career in corporate communications, and I've interviewed a lot of people. For when I worked with the Tribune, that's what I did. I interviewed people. I love interviewing people because you always find the treasure. There's always treasure, every single person. And it's always fun because it always comes out in different ways. You never know when it's going to come. It's really fun with Imagineers because especially the Imagineers who are very engineering, more left brain and all that, where you think, or a Disney historian, where it's very, okay, these are the facts, these are the, and I'd be talking to them, and and I would just, I always kind of, you just know where the question is, you kind of know where to go, and I would ask the question, and they would become kid-like, a child, and and it never failed. And I mean, we've got stories in the book. I couldn't have made up any of these stories because just incredibly powerful stories of a woman whose mother had just passed away, and they'd always gone with the parents to Disney World, and the mother passed away, and the father said it was going to be their 50th wedding anniversary trip, and the father said she would want us to go. Mm. They all went, and she remembers being under Spaceship Earth in the breezeway, being there with her mom, and seeing a bench where she used to sit with. And how do you? So I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but it's like I was just honored to be a witness to it. It's like I was just allowed to write it down. That's all. So, and then I won't spoil the ending, but there was an interview I was able to do with Michael Broggie, who's the son of Roger Broggie, Walt's first Imagineer, who worked on his train, Carolwood Pacific. And at the end of that interview, this is a big time. I know this is a teaser. I don't mean it to be, but at the end of the interview, he did something for me that completely took my breath away. So for me, those are the kinds of things, with the stories. I know, Theron, you've read all the stories, and you've heard so many of these stories. I don't know how it is for you.
Well, it always reminds me I mean, because I go back, obviously we see things from our own perspective, and right, in reading those stories is not unlike um, sitting in lunch with an Imagineer, right, which was a program I was a part of for years and years and years, and you get to hear from your fans basically that love Disney, that love what you do, so pumps you full of energy, but it reminds you in a technical aspect that these environments that are created have to have so many layers and so many different elements, because you never know what guest will resonate with what element. Somebody might remember the music. Somebody might remember the waffle cone smell. Somebody might remember a character, a piece of architecture, and on and on and on. And so seeing all of these stories get captured and put into the context of this voice back and forth is just really cool. It just reminds you that you have to create a very dense and very rich environment to enable people to connect with.
I hate to bring things up that I don't know the answer to, especially on a podcast. But at Spaceship Earth, remember they did the thing many years ago, my family did it, where you could get your images on little metal tiles. And there,
Yeah.
I forget what that's called, but we did it for our kids. And so when you go back to Epcot now, it's on the left-hand side, you'll see thousands and thousands of these images all together. That's how I think of this book. It's these are all these stories, and when you put them together, they form a bigger story.
Mm.
Yeah. So the book went where the book wanted to go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome. And
wheel.
I'm not going to make you pick out your favorite story and tell me why it was mine, but I'm not going to do that today. It's like picking your favorite kid, right?
Well, fortunately, if you want to find Scott Mink's story, you can go to our contributors listing in the back. And if I were to happen to say it was that he's on 3 pages, right? 175, 316, and 326. So not only him, but the podcast, because this podcast has meant a lot to us. So,
yeah. So one more kind of question about the book, and then we're going to get into some other topics that we're just curious about while we have you both here. So, James, you were talking about your book signing coming up. I want to come back around to that from a conversation before we started recording. Tell us a little bit about the first book signing, and then you said you had a story for us about that event.
yes, and can you also remember I want to talk about the Theron Skees throughout
Yes.
the book, because it also actually connects back to the Hangar Bar. But yeah, so with this book, I don't know. It always felt like Walt was with me, standing right over my shoulder with the book. And I don't mean that to be like grandiose or whatever, but it just felt it. I just felt like he was there. And so I don't know if it was like how it was for him, but I kind of knew what this was going to be, but I have a vision for it. But you also just have to be open to life, that life is going to take you where life takes you. And so, I always thought, Theron and I did a workshop. We did a workshop in the fall at Test Track at Epcot. It was our first How Does Disney Do That workshop. It was also the first time we ever met in person. So we had known each other 2.5 years at that point, countless, hundreds of hours of conversation, written a book together, launched 2 online groups, had never met in person. So we met in person that night, and we're talking about Spaceship Earth while we look out to the right and see Spaceship Earth lighting up. So coincidences are, so
it was epic.
And when I thought, okay, where would our first book signing event be? Well, probably a large major bookseller, retailer, etc., right? But no, our first book signing event, actually, I think I'm going to be the only one there just because of Theron's schedule, is coming up on Monday. It will be at Pop's Waffle and Ice Cream Shop in downtown St. Cloud, Florida.
What a better place to have a book signing.
Right? And I was with them today, and we were just talking, and I was loving it. Because it's the book come to life. They're talking about, they're going to invite, everyone's being invited to come in Disney costumes. I'll have the book there. We'll be signing, and they're going to be giving away. I think they're going to be giving away, bowls of ice cream and a palette where kids can put all the different mixtures. So they'll be like little Imagineers with the ice cream. And the woman was saying to me, I'll tell you what she said, and then I'll share her story with me. The woman was saying to me, "Well, I hope it goes okay in the schedule." And I said, don't worry. I mean, it'll go where it goes, and it'll be it. Everyone, we love Disney, so it'll be fine, And then the other funny thing there was that she and her husband love Disney, and the other founder doesn't like Disney. And so I was at the table, and on my left are the people who love Disney, and the other one who doesn't. And I'm like, it's okay. The book is really for both of you. And I said, in fact, in one of the chapters, I talk about that. I said, if you just go into any cocktail bar and you say, welcome home, the person who loves Disney will, wow, yeah. And the person who doesn't will roll their eyes. And I explained, it's like, for the person who doesn't get it, maybe this will help them just understand. I'm not telling them they have to fall in love with Disney. No. But just maybe understand why we're like the way we are, So this perfect example of how this book came to be. This woman starts telling me that her and her husband, they're this week, because they've been traveling so much, they're staying together at the Riviera at Disney World for the week. And they proceed to tell me that they had gone to a Disney park, I think Magic Kingdom recently. They were tired. They weren't really wanting to go, but they ended up going. They had dinner. They went on Buzz Lightyear, and they came off Buzz Lightyear. And right away, the woman saw a little boy in distress, choking. And she said, but he wasn't really choking anymore. He was like non-responsive. And the dad did not know what to do. He was, the mom was crying and all this. And so this woman who I was talking to, who owns part of Pop Waffles, went over. Her husband went to get security. She went over, took the child, performed Heimlich on him, and he got out the obstruction, and basically saved his life. And she said to me, and as tears are forming in her eyes, she said to me, I didn't really want to go, but it seemed like something wanted me to be there that night. And I looked over at the woman who said she didn't like Disney. I said, so even that's not going to do it for you? But those are the stories that I couldn't make up and that that I hear all the time. So I wanted to share that with you.
That's an awesome story. And I think you're right. Before we move on from the book, throughout the book, you hear or you read Theron's keys to Imagineering, to lots of different things. So this is going to be a little bit of a segue into my next question that's not book related. So Theron, tell us a little bit about how you decided to call them Theron's keys. If people can't figure out from our introductions earlier, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the really funny part is that it was James who made this suggestion, and it was based on a trip that he took to the Hangar Bar, Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar. And for your listeners and for you guys, I'm sure you're aware that on Imagineering projects, the team always likes to, pay homage to people on the team by, ingraining their names within the project in a way that's not obvious, but that just kind of flows. And that was one way that the project team did that for me. In fact, I didn't even realize that they had done that. But in Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar, as you go inside and by the restrooms, there's a lost and found cage that's there. So the next time that any of your listeners are there, have a look. And inside the cage is a small little shelf with a key racks on it and sets of keys, as if they've been found and labeled and hung up there. So if somebody comes back, they'll see that their keys are hanging. And for those that don't know, my last name is Skees, like water or snow. So what the props team did was hang a set of keys up there and said Theron S and then keys. So it was Theron's keys. So James saw that and we had this nerd out moment and he says, what if we called all of the points in the book Theron's keys? And I was like, that's cool. Let me design a graphic for that. That's awesome. So there you go. That's how that happened.
And
That's amazing.
And Scott, Theron started, he's an artist. So, he's a designer, a painter, a sculptor. And so a lot of the design work, so our original logo, he designed.
Okay.
We're very respectful of Disney throughout the entire book and with all our design elements. And then the publisher, River Shore Press, and they designed
Great collaboration.
Inside, and they did a beautiful job on that. But the other thing that is important to notice is I'm looking at the picture behind you, Scott, and I think this is looking towards it's looking towards the front of or no, that's looking towards the back. So far back right is a bathysphere. Is that right there? That's what it's called? So if you go to the far back right and look in the bathysphere where there's a table, so you'll have to probably explain to anyone who's eating there what you're doing.
Excuse me.
And you just take the book, show them the book. It's okay, I get it. Look up to your right, you will see a diving team, like an old photograph of a diving team that was recreated, and check out who the diver is in the bathysphere. That's all I'll say. Yeah.
All project team members scattered in old photographs all throughout the entire facility. So that was a way to kind of create an honorarium for all the great team members that put Jock Lindsay's together.
That's amazing. And Candace, much to Candace's chagrin, I have no problem interrupting people while they're eating if I want to look at something. I'll strike up a conversation. We'll do whatever we have to do. But that next time we go, we're going to look for both of those things.
Cool.
Maybe it'll be a good segue into your next section, Scott. But just throughout the book, again, we knew this book, the Disney fans, we felt that Disney fans would love the book, would like the book. I'll let them decide if they love the book. But I think what surprised us both, even though we knew it would be valuable, hopefully for design students and professionals, we didn't realize the kind of response we get, and we're already getting.
That's true.
And I think there's a real important reason that's happening. Obviously, Theron is the main reason that's happening. These keys are his stories, his insights, and then he has a chapter just for them. But I really truly believe fans will enjoy that chapter too, because it's always cool to hear.
I hope so.
It's always cool to hear the people talking who are working on things for you. So I just wanted to share that so everyone understood how it all worked together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Candace, before we move on, do you have any other questions about the book?
No, I love it. And I love the sense of, like, as I was reading through it, I've talked to you, James, a couple of times, and Theron and I have had very brief conversations on LinkedIn, just a couple of times. And I just noticed as I was reading through the book, the strong sense of community and belonging. And like, I've known all these people that were sharing their stories forever.
That is,
and I think it's just one of the things that like Disney does for all of us. Is it just, okay, you're part of this, and that's a great thing.
Love that.
At the end of each chapter, of almost every chapter, are questions. So like, and
I love that too.
Did you? Good. Yeah, it's good to hear. Yes. Again, so what just happened for me, for the first time ever, just so you know, I just got a sense of what maybe it was like for Theron when I came and told him about my reaction. Because when you just said that you loved the questions, I had never gotten any feedback about the questions before.
Wonderful.
And if they hopefully did what they were meant to do, which is help the reader become part of the story. And then I know already there are some people who are reading the book together. So maybe, they can share their stories with each other too.
And those questions too were, we didn't, James and I talked quite a lot about, producing a book that didn't talk at people, but represented a conversation between people, one, and two, encouraged others to join the conversation. So we really wanted all of the elements and stories and emotions and everything that we, explored in the book. We really wanted the readers to apply those things in their own lives, in their own office spaces, in their families, and whatever resonated with them. So those, James took those and put them in the form of questions so that you could evaluate yourself and apply. And I just love that. I'm so glad. I feel like a little kid. I'm like James. I'm so glad that worked and that it resonated with you, Candace. That's cool.
It did give me a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
of a crisis because as I was reading the book, I'm like, I should be writing some of my thoughts down because I'm going to forget them. And I'm like, the only place I have to write in the book, and I couldn't get myself to write in the book for some reason. I was just like,
Well, Scott, I posted that question in our Facebook group because my wife does not want to write in any books. I write in every book. I dog ear them. Because to me it makes it feel more like a friend and part of me.
Me too.
And so when I ask people that, there's probably going to be, I hope we don't cause a lot of conflict in relationships, but between those who write and those who don't. Yeah.
It's so funny you said that because the books that really resonate with me, that really speak to me, they look like Indiana Jones's travel diary, right? It's stuffed with stuff. It's post-it notes. It's got a feather in it.
You ever seen read the Velveteen Rabbit? Doesn't he end up, because it's the Velveteen Rabbit is so loved, he's all mangled up.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
yeah. Okay,
I
so
totally
go ahead,
support
Candace.
the erasable highlighter incident
Nice.
for my books.
Smart.
That's awesome. Okay, so jumping out of kind of book, but kind of not, because we're going to stay in the Hangar Bar. Theron, we chose Hanging at the Hangar Bar as our podcast name because one of our favorite things to do when we go to Disney is on night one, we go down to Disney Springs, we have dinner somewhere, and then we go just park it at the Hangar Bar. We people watch, we drink, we do all the things you're supposed to do in Disney Springs while we're sitting at the Hangar Bar. So tell us, Candace and I, and maybe our audience, maybe some deep cut Hangar Bar things that we should watch out for or that may not be readily available to kind of see when you're just sitting there watching people.
Let's see, it's 9 o'clock Eastern time. We probably only have about an hour, which is probably 3 hours too short to have this conversation. So I
We'd
will
be happy
just
to
give
have you back.
I'll give you some high level things. It was I have to really literally say, Disney Springs was, as a project, was probably the most complicated project I ever did in my whole career, and of that, but very rewarding. And of that, my favorite part of the whole project was the Hangar Bar. The Hangar Bar, myself and my creative team were really struggling in the beginning when we were concepting what this bar lounge space was going to be, because it's such a funny story. I'll tell it. It's very quick. We were developing fictional characters to sort of be representative of Indiana Jones, and we were pitching this to Tom Staggs at the time, who was the head of parks and resorts for Disney. We went through a couple of pitches and he just wasn't resonating. And he said to us in a meeting, he goes, well, why don't you just make it an Indiana Jones story? And he said, something like Chuck Lindsay. And my creative team and I looked at each other and were like, we can do that? And at the time, we hadn't purchased Lucasfilm. The Disney company, hadn't purchased Lucasfilm. So we were like, that's what we wanted to do, but you just gave us permission to storm the castle. So thank you. And we're all over it. So that whole idea came from Tom Staggs, and he sort of gave us permission to spend the time and the money in doing that. So that was the kind of leader that Tom was, right? He would nerd out with you just like you would as a creator putting this together. So that's how that started. The other really fun part that might be a deep cut is that if when we connected with the Lucasfilm archives, they had nobody on the whole team in anywhere in Lucasfilm at all. That was a specialist in Indiana Jones because they didn't have any product in process. Nothing, no content was being developed. It was all archived. So they had to dig around and find somebody. And we began talking with this person. And, when you look at Jock Lindsay in Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think he had maybe close to 2 minutes, maybe, of actual screen time. He doesn't come back in any of the movies. He's got some presence in comic representation of comic strips, that kind of thing. He is in canon, but there is not very much information about him. So we knew from the beginning we were going to have to create a lot more story around Jock, and that all of that was going to have to be coordinated and approved with Lucasfilm. So we spent probably the better part of a year working out all of the details of what the intricate story of Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar really was. And the important part of that is it had to bridge our timeline, where the landing, which was Pleasure Island, existed from the turn of the century all the way through till contemporary times. So we basically had the story that Jock launched many adventures from Florida, and we invented a lot of stories in the Caribbean, in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula that made sense. Aztec gold, pirate ship crashes, and Bermuda Triangle, and I mean, there's just so many stories that you could easily see that Indy would want to go see. Ponce de Leon, right? The Fountain of Youth. There's just so much in that region. So we really leaned into all of those stories, and we created a backstory of why Jock put his hangar there. And at first, it wasn't a bar; it was an operating adventure club, and he operated adventures and flew people. And if you're in the bar and you'll see a whole section for underwater, you'll see a whole section for on top of the water, you'll see climbing and skiing and all kinds of outdoor equipment are gathered within the hangar bar that represents adventurers that would come through. They'd meet there, pop in the plane, Jock would take them off and go about the adventures. And every once in a while, this mysterious man in a fedora and with a whip on his side would show up, and next thing you know, you're off with Reggie to some crazy adventure where you might die. And that's the stories that we tried to tell up until the time that Jock passed away. And we imagined that all of the adventurers, when they came back, they would sit around and what do you do after you go through a thrilling adventure where you survive, right? You sit around with the beer, tell all these fun stories. So we just imagined that Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar was the natural sort of progression of the adventurer style club, not the Joe Rohde, knowing the Joe Rohde Adventures Club, and we merged those two stories, but that it just became this place where people came to hang out. Eventually it became a bar. And but the deep, I mean, there is deep storytelling that's in that place in the form of props and graphics. The map behind the bar is everything. If you just sat at the bar and had drinks all night, you could just see all of the different stories there. And when we were finished, one of the prouder moments of my career is Lucasfilm said, wow, you guys have done such a great job defining all these stories. If we ever dig back into creating new indie content, we'll lean on some of these stories. It could really be fun. And of course, all of us are like, okay.
Yes, for sure. That's so cool. Now I have a new challenge for us, Candace. Next time we go, instead of hanging out on the back deck or hanging out front, we're gonna pull up a seat at the bar. We're gonna talk to the bartenders and look for all the stuff. That's
Absolutely.
it. That's what we're doing. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's amazing, and I
My
love
pleasure.
connecting us even more to our namesake.
My pleasure. I'll leave
That's
you with
amazing.
one other clue, because this usually blows people away. So the actor who played Jock Lindsay was actually a real pilot. And after Raiders, Steven Spielberg reached out to him, Fred North, I believe, I may have gotten his name wrong, forgive me. I believe it was Fred, and had him actually fly for the production crew, Steven's production crew on Jurassic Park. So the first film, Jurassic Park, you remember there was a big storm that hit in Hawaii, right?
Mhm.
That was real. That was a real storm. The pilot, Jock Lindsay, right? He actually flew the team out. He was the last flight out before, as the storm was hitting. So when you are at the bar and you look up at the bar, you'll see the portrait painted of Jock Lindsay in his older years, and you'll see a dinosaur claw that's up there. That is an homage to the actual actor who flew during production of Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park.
Okay, that's
That's
amazing.
amazing.
And while Theron was talking, I looked him up. It says Jack Lindsay was played by Fred Sorensen.
Fred Sorensen, thank you.
He
Yeah.
said it's back here in 2019. He actually visited the Hangar Bar to celebrate his 70th birthday.
He was amazing. We had so many great conversations. He was so generous and such a nice human being. He sent us pictures of himself as he, I would say, maybe middle-aged, right, in his late 40s, early 50s, and we were able to use that to paint his portrait because he was quite a bit younger during Raiders. So, anyways, it was great. It was really great. I also have an autographed coaster from the Ravenclaw from the actress who played Miriam, who owned the Ravenclaw, right? So that was pretty amazing.
That's so cool. And a question just popped into my head, Theron, and then James, I have another question for you. Theron, working at WDI that long, what is I'm going to say this in a weird way. What is the favorite thing you stole when you left? Like, is there something like a piece of memento or something like that you still have
Why am I
that you're just
seeing-
like, I love this?
Why am I seeing the book plummeting into the depths now? Here we go.
I would say the word stole I wouldn't use.
Right.
The items that I have in my possession that I have with permission, because I was and early in my career I was the art director for the Disney MGM studios at the time for 8 years, and during that time we partnered very closely. We created the partnership with the Disney studios, and you may remember from those days we brought over a lot of the films that were done, like Armageddon and Narnia and Haunted Mansion, and we would we take those sets and kind of recreate that experience in Orlando so park goers could come in and feel what it was like to be on an actual set. Well, I have a lot of artifacts from those films. One of those is from Armageddon. I have one of the controllers from one of the space shuttles. And I've got up on this wall, my wife suggested not to have it behind me in the camera, is a curved scimitar from Prince of Persia. That was really cool. So I've got stuff like that,
That's
and those are treasures. I have a poster over here from the very first Narnia, which is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and every single one of the actors when they were kids signed it. And what was funny about that is I was nerding out about meeting them, and they were nerding out about meeting an Imagineer. So that was really fun. So I have a nice collection of things.
That's awesome. And you used the word that I should have used. You said treasures. Like, instead of stole, what treasures do you have? That was a much better way to phrase that. That's why you were the Imagineer and I'm not.
Definitely treasures.
Yeah, that's why.
Right.
That's why.
It's the only reason. Give me this.
The only
damn it.
reason. The only thing. Nomenclature. That's
He's
it.
just slightly better with words than I am. That's it.
I love when Theron said that his wife advised him not to put it back there, because I mean, really, where would we be without our wives who are,
So true. That's the first place I put it. I'm like,
Yes.
Prince of Persia
Look at
scimitar.
this.
That's awesome. I put it right here. It was over my head, and she saw the camera, me on camera with the thing, and she goes, that might be intimidating to some people. And me and my, 100% guyness, I'm like, what do you mean intimidating? That's cool. So, but
I mean,
ultimately,
Darren,
it's not there anymore.
You're more intimidating than a scimitar. So, and I'll just say, after the surprises keep coming because Theron. I found out that Theron also was the designer working on, when they had the Narnia set up at Hollywood Studios, they had like you could walk through Narnia at one point.
The wardrobe.
And I remember taking our kids through that, and I remember our kids being on the speeder bike, right by the AT-AT, and Theron was the designer who worked on those two things. So before I even knew him, he was affecting my kids' lives,
Love it.
That's so cool. I love
6
that
degrees of separation.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes too.
I want to share this with you because as Theron was telling his stories about the Hangar Bar, I could see it happening again. Theron, Imagineers are just, they're kids, right? The kids who love to tell stories. And, when I found out the story of Disney Springs, I was blown away. Theron had told me a lot about this. And then one day, two of the contributors to the book, Brian Collins, who was a former Imagineer, Adam Berger, who wrote a wonderful book, Every Guest is a Hero, about Disney, who also was a show writer, independent show writer for them. They took me through Disney Springs and they showed me the story that Theron had been telling me about and how everything connects. And every part of Disney Springs has a story and connects. But the best moment of that tour, the unofficial tour, the two of them are walking and we're walking by, I always get the name of the T-Rex restaurant, dinosaur restaurant. What's it called?
Yes.
T-Rex Cafe.
T-Rex.
Cafe, thank you. We're walking past there. Theron had explained to me how it fit into the story, but Brian and Adam are talking and they see some fossils. There's some fake fossils there. And they start talking. And so they're trying to figure out how this fits in with the story of Disney Springs. And I knew it, but I didn't say anything. And Brian says, I think it was Brian who said, well, maybe it's a woolly mammoth, fossil. And Adam goes, well, no, I think it was Adam. He said, no, because woolly mammoths would not have been around this area. I believe it may have been a Stegosaurus, and they started talking and I'm just watching them do this. And it's like, oh, this must be what it's like when Imagineers just start telling stories, and that's why we love this stuff so much because they're so much fun.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Okay, so James, for you, one of the things that we want to pick your brain about, Candace and I talk an awful lot about making the move to Florida. We're big Disney fans. There's not a lot that holds us to the Midwest. We're a 24-hour drive or an expensive flight away from Disney, so it's something we got to plan for all the time. So talk to us a little bit about your journey to move from Chicago to Florida. I know you had a kid down there that was probably part of the impetus, but what made you finally pull the trigger, and is it something you don't look back on anymore, or are there still questions?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're trying to make the flight, I hear that they're talking about doing like double deck seating in airplanes now. So that might lessen the cost.
Yikes.
Yeah. So
no.
Yes.
Hard pass.
Talking about an industry that doesn't care about the guests.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry. Keep going.
Well, because I'm sure we're going to have this, that we want the book to be on all those airplanes. So
It's true. Okay. I retract my statement.
Can you tell I was in corporate communications and PR? So in terms of kind of moving down to Florida, so several things. Yes, our son is down here. So that's really important. He's a huge theme park fan. So he's been able to walk around Epcot with former Imagineers. He's been able to meet Michael Broggie. So it's just been a thrill for him and for my wife and stuff. My wife adores the sun. So if you're in Florida, the sun does show up from time to time. And when it shows up, it announces itself with great fanfare. So she loves the sun. We, I kind of grew up with Disney. I mean, as a kid, I saw Disney, but I didn't love Disney. But as soon as I got married, my wife started planning trips down here, and we started coming, and we ended up coming every year. We go on Disney cruises, and it really does. I know it does sound cheesy, but it became the second home, uh, to be here. So, but I have a special place in my heart for Chicago. I'm a Cubs fan.
I won't hold that against you.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's, but both places are wonderful. So that kind of led me. And you know what? I don't believe the book would have happened if I hadn't come down here. I was writing it from up in Illinois, but there are just too many moments that I had to be here to do it. And I can hop over to Epcot if I need to do something. So I think it had to happen.
Yeah. That's amazing. Candace and I always talk about just what you said, hopping over to Epcot if you need to do something. That's our big draw. We're like, we want to live like, oh, we have an annual pass. Let's just go catch dinner at a festival booth.
There's some nice property available in Golden Oak.
Yeah, we know. We're trying.
So
again, checks bounce, James. Checks bounce.
Candace, still talking about checks. Does he have like a MySpace account and stuff?
He might. I don't know.
Listens to music on a Zune.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
that's
MP4s
amazing.
are just running ragged around here.
Have you been to Celebration before, Scott, Candace?
We've looked at houses in Celebration when we've been dreaming. That's the condos and that kind of thing. I think I keep telling Candace I can work from anywhere. So Candace has does travel. She owns her own travel agency as her second job and just does an absolutely fantastic job at that. So I keep telling her when she grows that and that can be her only income that we need, we'll make the move the next day if we can have that happen. So that's just giving her more impetus to try and go out and recruit and sell and all those kind of things. So it's in our future, I think.
I just noticed something there. You just put the pressure squarely on her.
Right? I'm good at that.
Well done. Yeah.
Our wives are our support system, right?
If you read the dedication of the book, it'll tell you everything you need to know about a wife being a support system for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just had another story pop into my head that I want to share with you both about the book. I before we started recording, I was telling James that I'm not usually a very strong reader, so it takes me forever to finish a book. But this one, I was going to Chicago for work, flying. It was an hour-long flight, so the hour-long flight there, the hour-long flight home, and then an hour sitting in the basement. I finished the book in 3 hours. As a strong reader, that's tough to do for me. But it was fantastic. But on the flight home, I was just sitting there reading it, and it was late at night. The lights were dimmed. The flight attendant was coming through doing her service and that kind of thing. And I looked over, and she was wearing a Daisy pin on her uniform. Daisy dressed as a flight attendant. So I just kind of, me being the extrovert that I am, I leaned over and said, "I love your pin." And she just kind of looked at me, and I held up the book. So like as the signal that I'm a Disney fan, like I'm not just being a creeper pointing at something in your top half. And she smiled at me, but just kept walking. Like on the way back, she stopped me and said, "Okay, tell me more about this book." So we got to sit down, or not sit down. She stood there for a few minutes, like almost missed her opportunity to go sit down when the plane was landing, because I was telling her about what I had read in the book so far and the different stories that were in it. And it was before the book had officially published when I was reading it. So she just grabbed the book from me, took it forward with her, and took a picture of the cover so when it came live, she could buy the book. And I'm like, That's how Disney does that, right? Just a simple conversation starter. You build that connection almost instantly. And to your point, corporate branding, she's wearing a corporate brand on instead of the corporate brand of the where she probably should have been wearing, right? But I just thought you both would appreciate that is the kind of impact your book can have is as a conversation starter too.
And I think what you meant to say, Scott, is that she was very deeply committed to her own brand, which was an airline,
Right.
which
Yes.
gotta get both you guys have got. I gotta get you working on the
Yeah,
airline.
there's a reason I'm not in corporate communication too.
Well, you know what's funny is my wife was flying out last night, back up to Illinois, and there were storms. Imagine that, storms here in the summer, and so her flight was delayed a couple hours. And she texted me from the plane, and she was concerned about the flight and stuff. And she texted me from the plane. She said, "You won't believe it." I said, "What?" She said, "The flight attendant just came by, and she did what my wife is so wonderful at doing. She put the book out on the tray so everyone can see it, which is what an author really hopes his wife will do." He pointed at the book and he said, "I hear that's a really good book." No, the book's only been out a month, and I'm not. It's so the reason I'm saying that, I'm not saying that sounds like I'm blowing my own horn. What I'm saying is there's something happening. I don't know what it is, but it's not the book. I hope is just a conduit for it. It's like we need something, So hopefully it can help be a catalyst.
I
for that.
think the magic there, and this is, I think what you're really saying, James, is that it's not the book that is necessarily the magic, but it's the connection that the book fostered between people. And I think that's really cool. Strangers. And man, if there doesn't seem to be any higher hope or desire for something that you write than that, right? That it's a conduit that connects people. So that's what I was tickled pink when you wrote that. I was like, yes, that's what we want. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
I just go back to this whole thing started because Walt, he wanted to connect with people. I mean,
Yeah.
it all comes from the same place. So that's it.
Yeah. So we're going to pivot one more time and then we'll wrap up. Candace and I are huge cruise fans. We were just joking tonight because they just, in the last couple days, Disney put out that they're going to launch a new cruise ship based out of Japan. And I just looked at Candace and said, they are making it almost impossible for us to complete the fleet. But she's like, no, we'll still do it. We'll figure it out. We should have started a while ago because we made it through the first 4 ships and then we kind of paused to do some other things. We ran into the pandemic and other trips, that kind of thing. So
Right.
there's some reasons why we haven't cruised, so we need to get back to it. But Theron, I know you were intricately involved in the cruise line, and you said the Triton class, which is the fantasy or is it the Wish class?
It's we called it Project Triton, and we named the 3 new ships. I think the Triton class, unless that changed after I left. But yes, that's the Wish, the Treasure, etc.
Okay.
Whatever the 3rd ship is going to be named, which is not announced yet. That's what those 3 ships are called. I like you just read the announcement about Oriental Land Company making that arrangement with Disney and Meyer Werft, which is incredibly exciting because that ship is really going to be fun to design for the team, obviously because it's Oriental Land Company. That's the brass ring. That's the right level of investment. And so I'm excited to see in 5 or 8 years, however long it takes to get out, what that ship's going to be like.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how long does it take to go from ship concept to ship delivery?
That's that is a very good question. Designing and building ships is completely different than any other part of the parks and resorts business. Or I know it's now divided into Disney experiences and everything, but when you think of all of the physical assets, the destinations that are dreamed up, designed, and built all over the world, cruise ships is a very different animal altogether. It's more like ordering a custom vehicle. So you basically get a hold of the ship line, you order what amounts to a slot, a build slot in time. And because their ships are back to back to back to back, and it might be multiple different cruise line brands that are having their ships fabricated there. And just like a train, there's all of these ships are back to back to back. They just fabricated and kicked out and fabricated and kicked out. So what, in a sense, what Disney did was they bought a slot for 2 ships, and Meyer Weft came back and said, well, we've got just a little bit of time in between before the next one comes, and the way, it's going. And they talked, and Disney said, well, yeah, let's make it 3 ships. And that was a big surprise to all of us, because we were resource planning and everything for 2. And then we had to go back and get out the big crayons and scribble and make, okay, let's make room for 3. So it is very different. It was generally based on the Fantasy, which was the last ship that came out before the Wish, and we kind of used that as a basis because the branding within Disney Cruise Line is similar, right? All the hull size, shape, color, all of that design was very similar, but it had been 10 years between when the Fantasy had been released and when the Wish was going to come out. And so that was, let me see, I was there for 5 years, almost 5 years. And the design for all of the ships, the basic design was completed, and a lot of the interior design was completed for the first ship. And they had just started fabrication at the waterline after 5 years. Wow. So the ship then took another 2 years to actually build. So very long process before a ship actually hits the water.
So with that long of a timeline, how do you stay current? Like, is the design flexible enough that, let's say Disney releases a hit movie and you're in the middle of design plan and you want to create a bar after that movie? Are the plans flexible enough for that? Or do you like, well, let's wait another 10 years and put that on the ship then?
That's a great question. The interesting thing about cruise line, and especially the Disney Cruise Line, is it really is, and I'll just say this, it's in my opinion, it is really the highest form of guest experience that Disney offers. And part of the reason for that is, nobody goes to Magic Kingdom and hangs out in Space Mountain for 7 days, right? Space Mountain doesn't cruise around the country and stop at really cool spots. So you've got, 2,000 some odd guests on board, and you are a Disney fan. And typically the guests who sail with Disney Cruise Line are the real Disney fans. So they are hypercritical of that ship, and you're living in it day after day after day after day. So the design detailing and the storytelling has to be rich and deep and beautiful and all of those things. So to survive that level of scrutiny, all of that is foundational context to your question. When the ships were designed, the 3 new ships, we identified all of the spaces on board and what they were going to be. So if you defined a space that was a quote bar lounge, I'll just make up a function of a space, then when the ship launched, it was launched with the theme of Star Wars, say, or in the case of, I think what's coming out is going to be Haunted Mansion. You could, in the future, change that to any other concept that you want, as long as it's a bar lounge. So thinking through the layout of the ship is the absolute hardest, most difficult part of that whole design process. Bringing in IP, doing the interior design, there are complexities with that, of course, but that won't work unless your entire infrastructure of your ship is already laid out in a way that has defined what spaces can change and spaces defined that meet the flow of the guests within the ship. That's the complex part.
Yeah, just the logistics of all of that. Just blows my mind.
I mean,
It's
it's 3D chess. It is
yeah,
really the best way to describe it because in a theme park, everything is on a plane. It's all open. You have open space. You can see for thousands of yards. You get to play with all of these long views and big vistas as you're walking into lands, and you can see attractions in the distance, and you can plant trees to support that. You can't do any of that on a ship.
right.
It's all enclosed spaces. And the space here is affected by the adjacent spaces on top of it, below it, and on all sides of it. So it's totally 3D chess. You can't just say, oh, we want a restaurant here. It has to be a restaurant here because of this reason. And what do the guests do when they're out of that restaurant? They go here, and these spaces have to be close. So that was
Mm.
uber complex.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And you said one of the things you said really resonated is Disney fans go on Disney cruises and they're hypercritical. I would say though that Disney Cruise Line has figured out a way to rise to meet that.
Mhm.
The best Disney service
No
I have
question.
ever had has been on a Disney cruise ship. And that's not taking anything away from the parks, anything there, but
Yeah,
on the cruise ships, they have figured it out.
it's
It's
true.
amazing.
No question.
Candace, you should tell Theron your story about Cuba on
Okay.
when we were on the Wonder.
So, okay, so it was on the Wonder, and
My favorite ship.
yes,
Ours too.
ours too. But we have a habit of we always do second seating for dinner, and then after dinner we just go find the piano bar and sit and have cocktails and whatever the case may be. Well, we went to the piano bar on one specific night after dinner, and I didn't really want anything from the menu. And so our server, whose name was Cuba, asked, well, what are you in the mood for? And I said, well, something with watermelon sounds really, really good to me. And he's like, well, let me talk to the bartender and see what I can do. He goes and talks to the bartender, comes back a few minutes later and says, it's going to be a while. I'm working on something for you. I just have to run a quick errand and I'll be right back. I'm like, okay. He comes back probably 5 minutes later. And before I know it, there is this beautiful, like, watermelon martini with a nice big chunk of fresh watermelon on the edge of the glass.
Nice.
And he's like, I'm so sorry this took me so long. I had to run to the opposite end of the ship to get you some watermelon. And I'm like, oh my God.
And
So
yes,
true.
we are still Facebook friends with him. It's
Yes.
Yes. See, that's the
Yes.
key difference right there is that, again, my Space Mountain analogy, however ridiculous it is, makes a really important point, is that you could visit Walt Disney World, for an entire week, and you could go to Space Mountain 4 times, but you may not see the same cast members there over and over again, and you might high five them on the way past as you go in and experience this, journey into outer space. But on the ship, you are sailing with these crew members and you become friends with them. You get to talk to them. You know them. You see them every day. Huge difference. And that's what it's emotions, right? It's relationships rather. And it binds you together in ways that are really unique. And when you talk to the crew members, there's no other cruise line in the world that is the same as Disney in that sense. I mean, you meet people on other cruise lines, of course, but Disney Cruise Line is really favored in that sense by people because you get to know people so closely and so much fun and it's kids and yeah, it's a really magical kind of thing.
yeah. That's Candace, any other questions about the cruise line that you had in your mind?
I don't think so. We just
Okay.
need to get back on board one of those ships.
Yeah, soon.
I'm saying that now.
Right, soon.
Did you ride the Wonder after the dry dock? Sorry, just ask my own question.
No, I don't. I think it was before.
Okay.
We haven't been on one of the smaller ships in a while, and I miss those ships. The Magic and the Wonder are my favorites.
That was my first dry dock was the Wonder, and we dry docked her in Cadiz, Spain, and it was at the time the largest budgeted dry dock in cruise line history for any cruise line anywhere in the world. So Disney was really, I mean, obviously they weren't announcing that, but it was pretty well known in the industry. And the things that we were able to do on that ship, I'm super proud of the team for all of the immensely subtle Art Nouveau details that we did in that ship. And so anyways, if you go back and you go back to the Wonder, just keep an eye out for all of those really cool nuances.
Yeah, will do. That's awesome. Yeah, those again, we like the smaller ships because there's fewer people. And I think the way the adults only area as childless adults, we think about that a lot. But the way the adults only sections are set up on the Wonder and the Magic, I think are superior to any of the other ships. Bar district and that kind of thing is just so clearly defined. Like when we were on the Fantasy, one of our complaints was we'd be sitting at that bar that's kind of in the round, and there would be kids walking through to get to the elevator, and it would
Yeah.
take you away from the live music and that kind of thing. And our comment was always, we miss the Wonder.
Yeah. Well, if you get a chance, I would highly recommend. Again, I get nothing for recommending this other than the satisfaction of a guest who's really informed, really getting a satisfied experience. I would highly recommend you sail on the Wish because a lot of those challenges, if not all of those challenges, were solved on that ship. And I think you would still get a feeling of sailing on a smaller vessel, even though it's a little bit larger than the Fantasy, similar capacity of crew members, but the way that the spaces were divided up, I think it feels smaller in a sense, like the
Okay.
classic ships.
Okay. And I know on
Good
the
to
Wish
know.
I can get my hair cut while I'm drinking an old fashioned. So I kind of want to have that
Yes,
experience. So
yes, you can. You can get a shave there too.
right. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that experience too. Okay. So last thing we want to do is we have James, we've read the book, so I think we know the answer a little bit. We want to do just a small little game to finish. The 6 degrees of Walt Disney. What degree from Walt Disney are you? So, Candace, let's go us first and leave the experts for last on this one. So, Candace and I have
Okay.
the same one, so I'll let you describe our degrees of separation.
Okay. So being in the Midwest, we are about 4 hours from Marceline, Missouri, where Walt lived for about 5 years with his family, but he considered that his hometown. And there is the Walt Disney Hometown Museum in Marceline that was actually founded by a lady by the name of Inez. And we went to visit the Hometown Museum a couple of years ago now. And Inez was good enough to be sort of our tour guide through the museum. And I noticed on her vest that she was wearing a button that said, I met Walt in 1956. So when we finished our tour, we were just kind of chatting and hearing some stories. And I said, okay, so tell me about meeting Walt. And she said, well, he came back to Marceline for a visit and was trying to figure out he was going to be staying with us because our home was one of the first ones in Marceline with air conditioning. So we were talking to him about what room he would like to stay in. And our daughter said, you should stay in my room. And it's the pink one. And he said, well, why is that? And she said, because it's the best. So Walt actually stayed in Inez's home with her family. And several years later, he actually offered Inez's daughter a job at Disneyland because he came back to Marceline and he remembered her from that point when he stayed in her room. So that's our degree separation
Yeah.
from Walt.
So
And I
we're
love that story. And Inez is one of the most amazing people I've met.
So Scott, that's your same story too?
same one. And
Okay.
Inez opened up because, again, Candace's extrovert husband will talk to anybody about anything. So I love asking questions and I get curious. And she told us that whole story. And what really blew my mind about that is the fact that 10 or 15 years later, Walt remembered a little 3-year-old in the pink bedroom. Like remembered details that you would not expect somebody to remember from a one overnight stay. Just
Wow.
like again, you don't want to necessarily make it a religion, but Walt is one of those people that had that ability to connect and remember things. It just always just amazes me what kind of a person he was.
But does that really surprise you, noticing the level of detail that is evident in the parks and pretty much everything that he touched? Does that really surprise you all that much?
No, but it can still blow my mind when I think about it.
I know, but I mean, that's just par for the course, I think, for Walt was just that attention to detail that was amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's it's you just said something really important, Scott. You said not that it's a religion, right? And that's the thing about for me with Walt. It was like at times he becomes mythic, and it's like you forget this guy actually existed. For me, the degrees of separation I think is one, right, when you're one person away,
Mhm.
and it happened. I didn't think it would happen on the book. I just never thought it would happen. There were two times it happened. One was when a gentleman out on the West Coast, Bob Burdine, who's in our online group, asked me if I wanted to interview Willie Ito. Willie Ito was a Disney animator. Incredible story. His family was interred during World War II, and he worked on the Lady and the Tramp spaghetti scene and all that. So one night, here I am. I'm working on the book, and my phone shows a call from Willie Ito. So he's telling me his story of how the first time he visited Disney Studios as a teenager, just as on a lark to see if he could get an interview as an animator, Walt got on the elevator with him. And when he said that, I got goosebumps and I said, wow. And he said, that's exactly what I said. Yeah. And then talking with Michael Brogy at sitting at Test Track in the GM Conference Training Center, interviewing him as he's telling us stories of working on the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad as a young boy with his dad as they were helping Walt put the trains on the track, and then talking about how Roy and Walt and Roy would have the Christmas parties at the Disney Studios. And he remembers coming out and they were giving out presents in the lobby to all the kids. And it's like, what's happening here? What's going on? So those are mine. Theron?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, mine's might be a little bit of a cheat, but there's two of them. Having worked at Imagineering at a time when Marty Sklar headed all of Imagineering was pretty amazing, and Marty was a great mentor. We actually spent quite a lot of time together when I was in Hong Kong, leading the creative team there. I contributed to one of his books, and it was just really great to see how it was done from an Imagineer who walked with Walt. I mean, there's a picture of Marty standing on a big X with Walt and other Imagineers, and that X is where Cinderella's castle goes in Walt Disney World, right? So, I mean, this is a person who was on Walt's team. So that was one, and then the other one that has as much or more meaning was during Disney Springs. One of the trips that I made was to the Disney Family Museum in Northern California, and while we were there, we knew that Diane Disney Miller was there, and that we may have an opportunity to meet with her. It wasn't the primary reason we went, but we went to do a bunch of research on a bunch of things, and turns out that she was there, and she said they'd love to meet with us. So myself, one of my creative directors, and then we had some other members of the team with us, went up, talked to her. I kind of did a quick pitch of what Disney Springs was. I had my laptop with me, of course, always be prepared and know your audience. So I had a quick deck that I was able to go through and just to kind of show her. And even though it wasn't getting her approval or anything, it was just we wanted to share and look at it. And a career high for me when we were finished is she said, gosh, my dad and granddad would have loved this idea.
Oh.
And I was just like,
Speaking of goosebumps, I just got them. Oh, that's so cool.
It's just amazing. And she was so amazing. She, at the end of everything, we walked down, we were walking out of the museum, we were kind of standing outside. Our cars were here, and we were going to go to the airport and fly back home. And she said to myself and my creative director, because the other two people live there, she goes, do you guys need a ride to the airport? I'm like, no, Miss Disney, we're fine. Yes, thank you so much. We'll find our way, but thank you. And then shortly after that, she passed away. It wasn't but a few months after that moment. So knowing that you get this window of time to, cross paths with that kind of heritage is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. That's awesome. And James, Theron, thank you so much for the time. I know
Thank
it
you,
can
thank you,
be,
thank
I know
you.
you're on a little bit of a book tour right now, that kind of thing, but thank you for taking the time for us. We really appreciate it. This was a fantastic conversation. I loved every single second of it. To our audience, thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoy this conversation as much as we do. Check us out on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, all of those. And if you are listening to this episode, if you go to our Facebook or our Instagram and leave a comment on our post about this episode, you will be entered into a drawing to win a signed copy of the book. We want to give away a copy of the book after tonight, so we're going to put a few rules on it. We're not just going to put it out to the Instagram ethos of just anybody that wants to sign up. We want you to tell us that you heard about the giveaway from listening to the episode. So get your name on the list, go out there and comment that you saw us or you heard this interview, and we'll put you in the drawing for the book. Candace, any last thoughts?
I don't think so. It's been an amazing experience. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, James and Theron. We really appreciate you taking the time.
And how we end every episode, just remember, there is always a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
And we'll see you real soon.